Some of you might be interested in what I'm struggling with today, although to be honest it's probably a step too far for most people. It probably isn't something you want to do in the first place. When you buy doors, they come with a complete frame around them, looking like this, because what they have, the way they're hinged, is with a little pin through there and a little pin through there at each end. They are pushed in after they're pinned, so it's completely disappeared. You can't feel it with your finger at either end. On some cheaper ones, they're actually, in a way, better. It's just that the quality of the wood's a bit cheaper, because sometimes they leave the head of the pin still there, and that way you can get a grip of it and pull it out. But with these you honestly can't. There's no way you can remove this door from this frame without breaking the frame. And again, if it's reasonably well made, as these are, you can't prise the frame off. You can't just tug it off or push it or even cut it to some extent. It's properly jointed at the bottom and properly glued in, and so that's what you've got and that's what you're working with. There's a couple of problems with these for me, things I don't like. When you come to paint them, the paint will go into this groove here, because obviously you want the whole thing to be painted. You don't want to be showing any of the raw wood. And you're going to have to wait for that side to dry absolutely bone dry and go over to the other side to paint there. And you'll still find that at that junction here, where you've got, let's see if I can hold it up better than this, where you've got this movement going on in here with the door and the back edge of the door, you'll never get a very good finish. There'll either be little bits of wood showing, or there'll be clods of paint that have clodded up, or you'll just get marks in the movement when you move the door, and you'll end up, if you're really fussy, I'm not saying it's going to matter for most people most of the time, but if you're really fussy, you'll find that this edge is a real annoyance to you, because you can't get it to look good where the door opens. And the other thing I don't like is, if you look at your own interior doors at home, they have an architrave around them like that, but you won't find a kind of a door step at the bottom of your door. Your door just opens onto your room floor without this thing being there. And this is kind of multi-purpose in a dollhouse construction, because it is acting as a door stop, because the door closes behind it. You can hear that clicking up against the wood, which stops the door swinging all this way as well, because they're not on proper hinges, they're on pins. So if they're on pins, this door can swing in any direction at all. So this block is in here partly for that. It acts as a door stop. It's a strengthener, because all four sides are now rigid. So you've got a nice rigid construction to go into your hole of your doll's house. So I can see why it's there, I understand fully why it's there. And the obvious one, of course, I'm sorry, is that you need something to push your bottom pin into. Otherwise you've only got it pinned at the top, and that's not going to work. So if you wanted a more realistic door, and one that you can paint more easily, it is a bit of a struggle to do, because the first thing you've got to do is get this bar at the bottom off. And as I said, on a reasonably made one, the only way you can possibly do that is that you saw it off. So you trace the line across here and you saw it off, and you will end up with, if you hold on just a minute, your door hanging on desperately at the top with one pin in a frame that now looks like that. It's now more like your door at home, because there you go, you can just, it just opens up on your normal floor here, your floor surface, and there's your architrave going round. Sorry, there's your architrave going round, and there's your door sitting on the floor, which I much prefer. The problem now, of course, is, as I said, you've only got one pin at the top here holding it in, and that's not going to do, that's not going to work. So what you're going to have to do then is take your door out completely, pull the pins out. Even that's a more difficult job than you would think. I've broken it on both ends of this door. It hasn't pulled out, it's actually snapped off because it's a very, very thin wire pin, and when you're wiggling and jiggling it trying to get it out, if it's a good fit, it'll break before it actually clears. But in a way it doesn't matter as long as you can get it back flush again with the wood. I shall nip that up or rub it down with sandpaper or whatever when I come to finish it off. So now at least you've got pieces that you can paint independently of each other, which is nice. But you are going to have to put hinges on it. And to do that, you're going to have to make a rebate here for your hinge to sit inside. You can't just, firstly you've got a rounded edge on the door jamb, which makes it quite difficult to sit a hinge on, but you can't just sit a hinge on that anyway. If you go again and look at your own interior doors, that's your best bet. Look at your own interior doors and you will see that they're rebated on the door and in the frame. So there's a space to get the hinge in, especially when it's closed up. So here's the little tiny hinge closed up, and it's going to go in there, in that rebate, something like that. And it will do the same on the door jamb, so that your door jamb and your door will come together and will still run together with these pieces sunk in. It would be better actually if I showed you that open, I think, because you can see that it doesn't stick up at all. That's sticking up a little bit because it's got both pieces of the metal in. But in reality, what you're doing is making enough of a rebate to stick one piece of thin metal in. So there, once that's in there, hope you can see all this, it's very little and fiddly. Once it's in there, it will run absolutely flat along the top. It's not sticking up at all, proud of the top. And the hinge part, this mechanism down the middle, actually sits to the outside edge of your door. It doesn't go inside that rebate. So if you can imagine that that's now rebated in there, this side is rebated in the frame, and you'll have a little hinge and a hinge visible here, and then your door will open. It's very fiddly to do. To make the rebate, and I'm sure there must be tools to do it, proper tools to do it, if nothing more than a chisel, but there's probably some actual rebating tool. But all I'm doing with it, for lack of anything else, is that I take a decentish craft knife. Well, it's not the knife that's important, it's the blade, a decentish new blade, and I cut a nick down each side where the length of it is. It marks the length, and I just keep wiggling and wiggling and wiggling until I've cut a nick in each side. And then what I do is shave off bits of wood, like I was doing pencil sharpening. If you ever sharpened a pencil with a sharp knife, it's the same principle. You're just shaving off little bits of wood. Whittling, I suppose, is the truth of it. And if you work towards your little cut that you've made, you'll find that that little cut will stop you, and you'll end up eventually with a bit of a groove in it. It's not really that hard to do, it's just fiddly. The more fiddly part is actually trying to get these in and screw in these teeny weeny little screws, and I don't even know how I'm going to show you that. That has a head on it that you have to use one of these reading glass repair kits, the little screwdrivers in there. It's got a little crosshead screw. So that's how that works. What you don't want to do is do it because you think you know how it works without, here we go again, looking at your door jamb. Go and look at a real life door jamb and work out how it works. Because what I did was I took out a nip out of this part of the frame here, ready to rebate the hinge in, before I realised it should have been taken out of the inside of the frame. There. So do check, make sure you know which way you want your door to open, on the right or on the left, into your hall, out of your hall. Work out the direction. Find a door in your house that works the same way and go and stand in front of it and have a think about it. Even take this with you and mark it up with a pencil, whatever, to be sure that you know how that hinge is going to go in there. If, like me, you're not very good at three-dimensional imagining and dealing with different planes, it's really easy to think, oh yeah, that comes out the back there, when it actually doesn't. It comes out of the inside there, to get these two together. So I have got one damaged door frame, which is still going in the house because I'm not going to replace it. It's going in my housekeeper's room anyway, so it's in the tattier area of the house, and we'll just have to put it down to a bad carpenter that built the house, which it is. It's an opportunity here to just show you lots of tweezers. Well, in fact, before I show you those, the obvious tool if you're going to be messing about sawing things is a mitre block and a little saw. It's I think they're called razor tooth. It's a razor edge. It's a very, very, very fine edged saw. It actually comes out of the handle, so you can have different blades in it, or you can, she says, and I can't undo it, but it does. This unscrews and it comes out. And you can replace it when it's worn out, or you could put a different blade in it, or whatever. In fact, you could even put a knife blade or whatever you wanted into there. It's basically just screws in to that. I didn't actually use the mitre block particularly on this, other than to make a base underneath so I could saw into something solid like metal, so I'm not sawing my table or a work pad or anything like that. You'll find your own way. If you don't have one of these, not a problem. Stick a piece of rough wood under, or something you don't care about, basically, if you're going to end up sawing into it. I was about to say this is a chance to show you some tweezers, because if you're going to be handling tiny little screws, this is not the one I showed you. This is a little bit bigger. I'm cheating, so it's a little bit easier to handle. And you don't want to be using your fingers and your fingernails, or you're not that dexterous. These are your answer to your prayer, because they are very, very pointy tweezers. These are my favourite ones. They've got a bit of a bend on them, and I find I can do most things with these. So you regard them really as the extension of your hand. If you think of those as being your two fingernails and your two pointy fingers and fingernails for picking things up and messing about with things, and you're operating them back here. So it's kind of trying to think, if you make your brain think that that is down there somehow. It's an extension of your hand, regard it as that. And so yes, it's very easy to pick up a tool and manipulate it with those and turn it round and so on. They do get magnetised, as you can see. I need to Google how to demagnetise it, because sometimes that can be annoying when you're trying to pick up bits of metal in a certain direction. But these are a cracking pair of tweezers. Not expensive. I don't know what they were, perhaps £5 or something like that. I don't pay a lot of money for things. But when you're looking at them to buy them, just really look very, very closely at the ends of them and make sure they really do come together without any kind of air gap at this very point here. Because if you're using these for very, very, very fine things, they can't afford to have any spaces in them. They have got to be able to clamp onto something and stay there. In the 4 years I've been doing this, I do have another couple of pairs of tweezers, because I've been told at different times that these were wonderful too. I must admit, I don't use them very much because I find the other ones do everything. But they might be the ones that are for you. These are very similar to the ones I've just shown you, but they have a straight head this time instead of that bent end. And they are very, very pointy and very, very sharp at the ends. So they really are going to be working at a very fine point level on these. Again, I mean, picking up a screw is neither here nor there. That's too easy for words. But picking up little tiny bits of paper, if you're making flowers and things like that, it's really useful. I can actually maybe pick up a grain of rubbish out of there. No, because it actually wasn't solid. But you can pick up very, very tiny objects using those, and they are nicely sprung. There's a nice grip on them, and you've got a nice hold area here that works well. And this is another pair that works in a different way, and I actually can't get used to them. I'm sure if I persevered I would get used to them. The reason for these is that when you're using the other tweezers, you have to keep a grip on your tweezers. The minute you release your grip, you've dropped your object. So a lot of people who have a problem with that, who have hands that hurt or whatever, and they can't really just keep a grip on something for minutes at a time, these are perfect because they lock. It's like a locking pair of tweezers. So they work in the opposite way. You push to open them. You don't push to close them. So you push to open them, pick up your object, and when you release them, there's your object in there, and it will stay there while you're doing whatever you're doing until you push again to release them. So I can see the logic that these are so much easier to use, that it's a push to open, push to release, and the rest of the time your object is in place. But I must admit, my brain sort of just hasn't taken to it because it's so used to it, to tweezers working the other way around, that you push on a tweezer to keep a grip on something. Okay, so that's it for the door and some more bits of kit. See you next time.